Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today we are here to discuss the historic judgment rendered by Supreme Court that finally settles the rights of daughters in the compulsory property. Let us begin by understanding the words once a daughter is always a daughter and why the SC today in 2020 needs to say this. Let's take a step back and understand the genesis of the issue. Before 2005, daughters were not the co-partners in joint Hindu families. Then after the amendments, the daughters finally became the co-partners in the joint Hindu family. Then again in Prakash versus Pulvati, the division bench of SC declared that only the living daughters of a living co-partner do have the right in the co-partnery property. Then again in the Manna versus Amar, the Supreme Court held that the daughters are co-partners in their own right. To solve all this confusion, today we have Professor P.B. Pankaja ma'am, who is she is going to elucidate us on the matter and to discuss the nuances of the case and to discuss the implications. So, ma'am, I would request you to start the webinar.
Okay. Thank you, Akansha. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Good evening. Happy good evening for all of you. Hope everyone is safe and healthy. And today, I take it as a pleasure. It is a pleasure for me to be a part of your peer support network, which is rendering a wonderful service. And it is a selfless service. And I view it as it is a selfless service for the benefit of the students community whenever the need arises, and you are throwing open a platform for the students to analyze and appreciate the legal system that is existing in India. So in this venture, you are also activating the teachers to do research whenever a presentation is offered for us, and we have to do research on it before presentation is made. And so you are doing services for both to the students community as well as the teachers, and I strongly believe in it. Okay. And even teachers are in the learning process always. So now I also congratulate the peer support network team, the organizers of this program, in their academic endeavor, academic exercises. And I would like to throw light upon the recent judgment, that is Vinita Sharma versus Rakesh Sharma, where the Supreme Court has settled the controversies and the different interpretations that have been made previously by the same Supreme Court in some other cases, which we are going to discuss. And in this process, and we are also going to discuss the impact of this judgment. Okay. And we in this so with this short introduction, and I would like to throw light upon the basic understanding of co-partnery and joint family, because you all know what is joint family and co-partnery. And still, to refresh your mind, I would like to just throw some basic understanding of these two concepts, joint family and co-partnery. So can I share? Can I able to share the PPT? Hello?
Yes, ma'am, you can share the PPT.
Yes. So may I know the time that is given to me? Hello?
Yes, ma'am, it's an hour.
It is 1 hour. Okay. So The topic that I have that has been given to me today for today's discussion is the Supreme Court on daughters' right in the co-partnership property under Mitakshara Hindu law. And you all know the distinction between Mitakshara and Daibaga. I need not go into it. So this judgment, today's discussion on the Supreme Court judgment, it is pertaining only to the Mitakshara Hindus, but not the Daibaga Hindus. Okay. So in this discussion, the final focus will be on Vinita Sharma and Rakesh Sharma, and which was the decision was rendered and this month on August 11th. And it has created a lot of sensation among the legal community, and each one trying to interpret it in their own way, okay, in his or her own way. And many interpretations are coming, many comments are also coming. So in this regard, I will try to do justice to this topic today. So now I'm just taking you to the basic understanding the concepts, who are joint family members and who are co-partners. Why I have taken this fundamental concept means it is not that you all do not know, because most of you might have studied this family law too, but still there are certain doubts or confusion or anomaly among certain people, that whether the unmarried, that is whether the daughter-in-law on marriage becomes the co-partner in her husband's property. It is not at all. So the daughter-in-law will be only a joint family member in the husband's family, and she will never become the co-partner. Here the co-partner rights are given only to the daughters in their natal family, and the daughter-in-law also in her natal family will be a co-partner, but in her husband's family she will be only a joint family member. So in order to clear that confusion, I am just taking you to this present slide. So joint family, it is a bigger institution, and it consists of father, wife, and unmarried daughters. So this I wanted to repeat it, because the daughters on marriage, they become the joint family members of their husband. So here joint family accommodates only unmarried daughters, and his son and the son's wife, that is daughter-in-law, and their unmarried daughter, and it goes on like that, and his son and daughter-in-law and unmarried daughter, and it goes, you can see that the males and females up to any generation, they constitute the joint family members. So now, in contrast, if you just look into the co-partnery, and all the co-partners are necessarily joint family members. So here, if you just look into it, father, son, son's son, and son's son's son. So up to 4 generation, they come under the category of co-partners according to the classical law. And then later on, it has been enhanced. The platform has been enhanced and accommodating daughters also. And in this category, not only unmarried daughters, but married daughters are also given accommodation in the co-partnery. So here this is the classical concept: father, son, son's son, and son's son. And this is up to 4 generations only. So any doubt you have, you just pen it down. And sorry for taking such a long time for marriage. Okay.
No, ma'am. Please don't say sorry. Please don't say sorry, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Now I will continue. Okay.
Sure, ma'am.
So in this, is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, yes. So coming back to a discussion, in joint family, you have male and female members up to any generation. It doesn't have any generation limit. But on the other hand, co-partnery is an inner circle within the joint family. And among the joint family members, classical, according to classical co-partnery concept, father, son, son's son, and son's son, up to 4 generation. That is, if you take father as first generation, up to 4 generation, the males happen to be the co-partners. And they had the privileged right of inheriting the ancestral property. And in the ancestral property, they acquire a right by birth. And all these things you all know. So here they have, whenever they want, they can claim partition, and they can take their share and go away. All these are the privileges of a co-partner. So according to the classical concept, it was confined only to the male members. But certain legislative inroads into the co-partnership took place, and from 1986, the co-partnership has changed into modern co-partnership. So because the year is very important, and a state initiative has been taken up, and for the first time, and AP has made an amendment in the Hindu Succession Act where it said unmarried daughters also will become co-partners. So for the first time, among the daughters, there was a distinction between married and unmarried daughters, and the unmarried daughters were included within the co-partnership. So this is the first step where the unmarried daughters have become co-partners. And following the AP amendment, then Tamil Nadu also taken up this amendment, and there also it declared in 1989, from 1989, and they also categorically said that only unmarried daughters can be accommodated as co-partners. They were declared as co-partners, and followed by Maharashtra in 1994 and Karnataka. So in these four states, the unmarried daughters have become co-partners even prior to 2005. So that is why we find many cases pertaining to the state amendments also, which have reached the Supreme Court, and they have been decided by the Supreme Court along with Vinita Sharma also. So there the references are also made in that particular judgment. So here, in these four states, unmarried daughters were co-partners. And in 2005, I don't want to go into depth the details why the central initiative has taken up. And in 2005, the marital status of daughters became immaterial, and it said all the daughters in a joint Hindu family, whether married or unmarried, and they would be declared as co-partners, and they shall by birth become the co-partners in the joint family. So now you just find the distinction, old and new position, and father, son, 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 and father. And here also you will find father, son and daughter are co-partners, and from in the son's branch, son's son and son's daughter are co-partners, and in the son's branch, son's son's son and son's daughter, they are co-partners. So the daughters of the family, and daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter. So they were included within the purview of co-partnership. And here, the lineal descendants of daughters, for example, daughter's daughter, daughter's son, and daughter's son's daughter, and the branch, and they are not given the place in the co-partnership, because the daughter's branch, they will become the co-partners in her husband's family. Okay, so that is the reason, logic behind it. So it was the lineal descendants of the daughters are not co-partners. It is a personal right. So the daughter and daughter's daughter and the son's daughter and son's daughter, and they acquired the co-partnership right in their personal capacity, unlike in the case of sons. Okay. So now we will also discuss about the dual property system that is existing. And Hindus have this dual property system where a Hindu can hold joint family property, which he inherits from his father, father's father, and father's father's father, and he can also acquire separate property. This distinction is not found even in the Dayabhaga, that is to a limited extent, but among the other religious communities also, this dual property system is not working. So only among Hindus we have this dual property system. And it also needs a basic understanding, because sometimes it is after this Vinita Sharma case, and some started saying that even in the parental property, and daughters acquire a share. Already in the parental property, daughters have already given a share according to Hindu Succession Act. They succeed to the property of the father after their death. So that is different. So here, in order to have a clear understanding what constitutes joint family property and what constitutes separate property, you must have a clear idea. So joint family property, mostly they are ancestral property of the ancestors. So for example, if the father if the grandfather has ancestral property in his hands and a separate property, and the father will be a co-partner and the son also will be a co-partner in the grandfather's ancestral property. But in the case of the grandfather's separate property, the father will succeed according to Hindu Succession Act, and the father's heritage in the separate property of his father, that is the grandfather, and it is only an obstructed heritage. During his lifetime, during the lifetime of the grandfather, father cannot ask for a share. So the separate property of the grandfather comes in the hands of the father only as a separate property, and in which sons cannot claim a share. And the separate property after the death of the father, and the sons will acquire it by way of Succession Act, that is as a class 1 category heir. And like that, the separate property will always follow in the hierarchy of separate property. On the other hand, the joint family property and ancestral property in the hands of the ancestors, that will come from generation to generation, and every co-partner has undivided or collective or vested interest in it by birth, and they have got, by virtue of their right by birth, right to demand partition at any time is available, and it is unobstructed heritage, and even during the lifetime of the grandfather or father, they can claim a share. And then after the death of that co-partner, then the other co-partners will inherit the property, that is the rule of survivorship. But there is also a change in the rule of survivorship, and it has been diluted now. And now the present discussion, I want to highlight this point, that you must focus only on the daughter's right in the co-partnership property only. We are not bothered about that. We are not concerned about the daughter's right in the separate property, and the Hindu succession will take care of itself. And now the entire discussion, all the judgments which has created confusion, and it is only relating to the co-partnership property only. Okay. Yes. I will take you to section 6, the crux of our discussion. So I am not going, it is a lengthy section, and it is a substituted section in 2005. So whenever you find this substituted section 6, that means the section 6, the new section 6 under the 2005 Act. So now I am going to just pick only certain provisions which will be the topic for our discussion. So section 6(1), if you have a barrack, or you can also mark it. On and from, I have highlighted in red, on and from the commencement of the Hindu Succession Act in a joint Hindu family. So this here also wording it as a joint Hindu family, it is also a troublesome. So I will discuss about it later, how this joint Hindu family should have been avoided, and the Mitakshara family should have been inserted here. Okay, in a joint Hindu family governed by Mitakshara law, the daughter of a co-partner shall. Okay, so on and from, these two terms, they indicate that section 6(1) is going to be prospective. So from 9/9/2005, and in the Hindu joint family, the daughter of a co-partner shall by birth become a co-partner. So by birth, it is an antecedent event. That means she might have born in a back date also. That means before 9/9/2005. So here it implies a prospective effect, and it implies a back date, become a co-partner in her own right. So this is one important wording. So there is a confusion here also, whether she will in the present situation, that is whether the daughters acquire the co-partner interest under her father, or through her father, or in her own right. And she acquires this right in her own right in the same manner as the son. So here there is no need for anybody's charity for her to get her property. And like a son, she also became a co-partner by birth in her own right. So here this is one important thing. So by birth, co-partner status is from a back date. So this recognizes the co-partner status even if it is from a back date. Now B, and you have to conjoin this. Shall, the daughter of a co-partner shall have the same rights in the co-partnership property as she would have had if she had been a son. So here the crux is only in the co-partnership property. So here this is a mixture of prospective and retrospective phenomena. Okay, so this has created a confusion. So now I will then go to the proviso. Provided that nothing contained in this subsection shall affect or invalidate any disposition or alienation, including any partition or testamentary disposition of the property which had taken place in that family before 20th day of December. You all know that this date is the date where the bill has been introduced in the Rajya Sabha first. So here, where the public come to know that the bill is going to come out as an act where the daughters are also must be given their share. So here, in order to safeguard the interest of the daughters here, the law said that the legislature has said that by making them as co-partners in the co-partnership property, they cannot unsettle any partition or any testamentary disposition by the co-partners which had already taken place from this date. Okay, so this is one thing. So this is also a back date, which gives that whether section 6 is prospective or retrospective. So it is a mixture of prospective as well as retrospective phenomena. How it has been settled and discussed variously in, through various interpretation, we will discuss. Now, 6.5. This is nothing but reiteration of the proviso. Nothing contained in this section shall apply to a partition which has been effected before 20th day of December 2004. Now, that is, daughters can now claim in property if the property has been unpartitioned. So those properties which have not been partitioned prior to 20th day of December 2004, and there the daughters will claim a share, but those properties which have already been partitioned and the daughters cannot have a share. So now partition, under Hindu law, you know that there are many modes of effecting the partition. The partition can be by way of oral partition is also permissible, need not be, even if it is written, it need not be registered. So unregistered partitions can be there and oral partitions can be there. And only some people, they will go in for registration of their partition deed. So registered partition is also there. And then some people, that is some co-partners, they go and file a suit for partition and obtain a decree for partition. So that partition out of the decree of the court. So there are many modes of partitions that can take place in a Hindu family, in a Hindu joint family. So there was a debate when the bill was introduced. Actually, 6.5, it was not there. It was not there in 6.5. So now there was a debate and the Parliamentary Standing Committee debate took place, and they wanted that the term partition, it should be clearly defined in order to avoid any anomaly. So they thought that the partition should be defined. And there was also a report, that is the Standing Committee report. They said, since oral partition is also valid partition under Hindu law, many of the families, they might have partitioned, that is ignorant of the future legislation. They might have made some family arrangements, or they might have taken some, they might have made the partition orally, and which they might not have bothered to write it and get it registered. But those partitions may be genuine partitions also. So such genuine oral partitions, and which can be proved. For example, if in a family 4 brothers are there, and they have orally, they have understood that each one will get A schedule, B schedule and C schedule. But there is no partition deed as such. And in the revenue records, they might have mutated their names. So A schedule belongs to son, B schedule belongs to the second son, like that. So those oral partitions where certain documentary evidences are there, those should also be included within the definition of partition. This happened in the Parliamentary, that is Standing Committee. So that discussion, and they have also made a recommendation to the legislature that oral partition should also be included. But when the act came, it said that the partition means, so the explanation in partition means any partition made by execution or deed of partition duly registered under the Registration Act or partition effected by a decree of court. So now only these two modes of partitions are mentioned, and they could not be touched by the daughters, and remaining all the partitions are left for and open for daughters' claim. So this you have to understand what happened during this period. So now only two types of partitions have been mentioned here. So that means the scope of the daughter's claim has been widened, and the scope of the son's plea, it has been narrowed here. Okay. So it safeguards only two kinds of genuine partitions. All oral partitions, family settlements are open for reallotment under the presumption. What was the presumption? That there might be a later manipulations. So this you have to understand. This is one important contributory factor for interpretations also. So now ultimately when you see and you are confused whether Section 6 has prospective or retrospective operation. So now the questions are opened up. Now, whether Section 6(1) prospective or retrospective, whether only those daughters born after 9/9/2005 will get benefit, or whether living daughters born before 9/9/2005 or even before the Hindu Succession Act came into force, that is before 17th June 1956, get benefit. So first one is whether Section 6(1) is prospective or retrospective. And then what should be the year of the birth of the daughters, whether they should be born after 9/9/2000 only, that means recently born daughters, or whether even previously born daughters. Previously means whether before 9/9/2005 or even before the Hindu Succession Act came in the year 1956. So these questions came before the court in many cases. Then the second one is whether she claims it through her father or in her own capacity. There is an express mention that she gets it in her own capacity, but in some cases the court interpreted it that and she gets it only through the father, and hence the father must be alive as on the date of 9/9/2005 for the daughter to get the share. So that is why I have put this question also, whether she claims it through her father or in her own capacity. Now, the third one is whether daughter is only of living co-pastor or even of predeceased co-pastor. That means whether the father should be alive as on 9/9/2005 or not. Then, if the partition is effected by decree of the court. So in the explanation, I take you back to the explanation. That means partition effected by a decree of the court. So this decree, what does it mean, this decree? Because in a partition suit, there are two decrees. One is a preliminary decree and the second one is final decree. So what decree that is being mentioned? What is the intention of the legislature? Whether it means final decree only or even preliminary decree is sufficient. So here, if the partition is effected by decree of the court, it cannot be whether it can be reopened by the daughter or it cannot be reopened by the daughter, whether final decree or preliminary decree. So here, this is also one important confusion. So now we are going to look into the judicial decisions. The first one, I take you to the Ganduri Kotishwarama and Chakri Enadi. It was 2011. No doubt there is a less discussion on this Ganduri Kotishwarama, but I view that this is the genesis where the confrontation or the interpretation, conflicting interpretation has started. So here, in this case, I have just briefly narrated the facts of the case. And in all the cases, I am going to discuss these 5 cases, which are the last one is Vinita Sharma case. And the facts, you will find that they are similar facts, but only the dates will be different. And the pleas will be different. And the plea taken by the male co-partners would be different. And the decisions of the courts will be different. And the reason for the decision also will be different. But the facts are similar, mostly the similar. A father, 2 sons and 2 daughters. The son filed a suit for partition in 1991, and pending the suit, father died in 1993. So the male co-partner, as he was entitled to suit for partition, he filed a suit for partition. And you see, in 2003, preliminary decree was passed declaring his share. So how much time it was taken? From 1991 to 2003. So even he could not get a final decree, it was only a preliminary decree. So after 2 years, pending this final decree, this amendment came in 2005. And automatically, according to the amendment, daughters can also claim a share. So son filed a suit for partition the co-partnership property. So daughters also said, we are also entitled to share. So you please reopen the partition and you also reallot the share. So here these are the facts. Now, son, he relied on section 6(5) and its explanation. Just now we gone through that explanation. As preliminary decree has been passed by the court before 2012-2004, that daughters, their sister, that means his sisters could not ask for reopening of the partition. As per law, this is the date, cutting date, and the preliminary decree was passed in 2003 before this cutting date. So preliminary decree is also a decree where the shares of the son have been earmarked. So once a share has been earmarked, the daughter should not disturb that. So that was a contention of the son. Supreme Court here, it said, the partition that the legislature has in mind in the amendment is undoubtedly a partition completed in all respects. So it wants to say that the decree that is mentioned under section 6 explanation, 6(5) explanation is not a preliminary decree, but only a final decree. Final decree alone will complete the process of partition. Because in between preliminary decree and final decree, any supervening changes may take place, and the court may also have the right to change the preliminary decree accordingly. So here, according to the court, it hinted that 2005 amendment is an intervening circumstance where the daughters can also enter. And so since it is, and that is one point, then it said, since it is a beneficial legislation, liberal effect should be given. So in para 18 of this Ganduri Koteshwarma, you will find this. It cannot be equated with the rule that severance of status occurs on communication. Here, I will take you back to the partition. And in a partition, in a Mitaksha partition, generally 2 steps are there, 2 stages are there. The co-partner can demand partition. The moment his intention to get divided is communicated to the Karta, then the severance of status takes place. Okay, so that is called de jure partition. So once the severance of status takes place for all practical purpose, and he becomes a divided member. Okay, but the division by metes and bounds will take at a later stage. That is called de facto partition. And I am just refreshing your memory. You just recollect that aspect. So now, actually, according to the Mitakshara law, the moment a son declares his intention to separate from the father in the co-partnership property, then he becomes a divided member. So the son also said, by filing the suit, I have communicated my intention to separate. Severance of status has taken place even while filing the suit. And filing of the date of filing the suit is severance of status. So I have been separated. A partition has taken place. De jure partition has taken place. So, and daughters could not get a claim. But the Supreme Court here, it said it cannot be equated with the rule that severance of status occurs on communication. So here, totally the Supreme Court in this case ignored that genesis of or the basic principle or phenomena in the Mitakshara law, and then allowed the appeal of the daughters and held that they were entitled to reallotment of shares in the co-partnership. So this happened in this particular case. So now the object that since it is a beneficial legislation, we have to liberally construe and we have to widen the platform for the daughters to get the share. So that is a laudable object, we can say. But according to me, it is my personal opinion, with due respect to the judges and the court, I find two discrepancies in this case. One is, here you find the daughters were given share as per 2005 Amendment Act. Now, when was the father died? And he died in 1993. So the death of the father occurred prior to 9/9/2005. The father was not living as on the date of passing of this amendment, coming into force of this amendment. So totally this aspect has been ignored. It has not been considered by the court. And then the second one is, and the main focus of the interpretation was on partition, whether it is preliminary decree or final decree. And the main thing, that what is the date of the death of the year of the death of the father, it was not taken into account also. And now, underweight the fundamental principle of Hindu law, that is severance of status. It is the fundamental principle of the Mitakshara co-pastorate, severance of status. And so that rule has been ignored. It has been underweight. That is, no importance has been given to that rule in the Mitakshara co-pastorate when the case pertains to Mitakshara co-pastorate. So these two observations you please keep in mind. Okay. Now, after that, in 2015, Prakash versus Poolavati. And you all know, now it is on air, that Prakash versus Poolavati, the operation, that is the daughter claimed a share in the co-pastorate property, and the present Vinita Sharma case, it has overruled Prakash versus Poolavati. So now Prakash versus Poolavati is no more a good law as per Vinita Sharma ka judgment. Okay. So now, what are the facts? Post 2005, daughter claimed a share in the co-pastorate property in the hands of her brother. That means father died in 1988 and brother became the co-pastor. And so the sister claimed a share. And she relied upon Law Commission's report, 174th report, you can go through it, pleaded that the amendment being a piece of social legislation to remove the discrimination against women, even if father had died before the amendment, daughter should get the benefit of the amendment. So here, that was her plea. Karnataka High Court, it was a case of Karnataka. Karnataka High Court upheld the plea of the retrospectivity. That means she won't retrospectively benefit. Even if the father died earlier, she wanted to get the benefit. And the court upheld the plea of retrospectivity and decided in favor of the daughters. I am giving only the brief gist of the case. So an appeal was preferred by the sons before the Supreme Court. Now, what happened in the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court had, you just keep in mind the earlier decision. And Section 6 is not retrospective. It is prospective. Both father and daughter must be living as on 9/9/2005, because the very commencement of the section says, on and from the commencement of this act, daughter shall be in a joint family, daughter shall. So the daughter of a co-pastor means living daughter of living co-pastor. That living is jointly away, that is commonly applicable to both. Okay, so this is the reason. So the reason is that and one more reason is that on the death of the father in 1988, you all know the notional partition had taken place and vested on the son. So this is one important Section 6 according to the old section and even in new section. And once the father dies, then the notional partition takes place and his interest in the undivided interest is crystallized, and that has taken place. So his undivided interest, because at that time the sons were only the co-partners, and the vested rights and the co-partners became the got the property. The vested rights shall not be taken away by a subsequent amendment in the absence of express provision. So Section 6(1), it doesn't say, anywhere you can find that whether it has got retrospective operation or not. So here, in the absence of express provision, and vested rights cannot be disturbed. Even a social legislation cannot be given retrospective effect unless it is so provided for or intended by the legislature. Hence, no other interpretation was possible for the court. So here, the same social welfare legislation or social beneficial legislation was highlighted there, and the court has accommodated. Here, even if it is a social legislation, we cannot cross the boundary. We cannot give a different interpretation, which is not intended by the parliament. So this is the difference between Ganduri and Prakash Pulavatika case. Okay. Then, after 3 years, and even there is another case, I think. Yes. Yes, before Mangammal Dhanamma case happened. So the decision was given. So this is all, both the cases are of 2018, but the first judgment is Dhanamma's judgment, later judgment is Mangammal judgment. Because in Mangammal judgment, reference has been taken both for Pulavati as well as Dhanamma. So father died in 2001, leaving behind him 2 sons and 2 daughters. So the similar facts. Okay, don't worry about the facts, don't get confused. And the suit for partition by son's son was pending. Amar happened to be the son's son. Okay, and here also the preliminary decree was passed. And 2005 Act came, and daughters as usual claimed a share. Okay, so now the nephew, brother's son Amar said, as they were born prior to the Hindu Succession Act 1956, because Dhanamma happened to be a senior lady, that is, senior citizen, and she was born even prior to 1956, they could not be treated as co-partners. Okay, so only the question was whether the daughter born before 2005 could claim the benefit or not. Here you see, and there is the issues are different. In the previous case, whether the daughter should be born before or after. Okay, here whether daughter born before 2005 could claim the benefit or not. The second one is whether the daughters can claim reopening till final decree is passed. So here it was a case where preliminary decree was also passed. So you can recollect or you can connect the Ganduri Koteshwarama case here, where decree means final decree and not preliminary decree. Okay. Now, the Supreme Court in this case allowed the daughter's claim. In Ganduri, the daughters won, and in Prakash versus Pulavati, the daughters lost the case because the father's death happened to be pre-2005. Again, in Dhanamma, the daughters gained, that is, they won the case. The Supreme Court allowed the daughter's claim on 2 grounds. A living daughter, even born before 2005, can claim. So it has accepted part of Pulavati. So Pulavati said, in Pulavati, the court said, the daughter must be alive, living daughter. The father must be a living father. So here, the first part the court has accepted, and the second part it has ignored. It has overlooked. And it has accepted. So part of Pulavati, accepting the Pulavati, and it also appreciated Pulavati's case as the best case, and it will also serve as a precedent. But it looked into only one part, one aspect, one segment, that she is born before 2005 and she is a living daughter. The second one is partition decree means final decree in a suit for partition as per Ganduri, and the court said, yes, it is already well established, and so, and the final decree, till the final decree is passed, the daughters can ask for reallotment. So here you see, there is a mixture of Pulavati, a part of Pulavati and Ganduri case. So it has created a confusion. So what has been decided in Pulavati, it has not been given the same version in Dhanamma. So when father died, was not looked into, whether it is overlooked or not considered that fact, because the court never, however, the court did not expressly say that father need not be alive as on 9/9/2005, as many people understand. Yes, after this Vinita Sharma, and I happened to listen to many versions relating to this Dhanamma case, and the judgment does not exhibitly or expressly anywhere say that the father need not be alive as on 9/9/2005. In this case, Dhanamma's case, the father's year of death, it was just overlooked. It was not considered. No attention was paid, whether by the parties or by the court, and the father's death was never been considered. Okay. But it did not say that father need not be alive, because this statement, father need not be alive, as on 9/9/2005, it is one of the key points in the Vinita Sharma case. In Vinita Sharma case, the court has clarified that father need not be alive. But in Dhanamma case, it did not say any statement, it did not make any statement, but it simply overlooked the date of father's death. So this you have to distinguish between Dhanamma and Vinita. So, Supreme Court appreciated the Pulavati's decision as authoritative pronouncement, but followed Ganduri Kotishwaramma case. So it has created confusion and anomaly has been. So this was also a case rendered by the same Supreme Court in 2018. Now, in Mangammal versus T.B. Raju, facts are similar. Married daughters filed a suit for partition of co-parsonage share. So it was a case using under Tamil Nadu Amendment Act. So in Tamil Nadu, when it was enacted in 1989. So after Tamil Nadu has brought in the amendment, till 2005 amendment has not come into force. The daughters, married daughters, you see the married daughters, they filed a suit for partition of co-parsonage share under Tamil Nadu Act. And obviously, their claim cannot be maintainable. So their claim was rejected because married daughters cannot be co-partners. Only unmarried daughters were accepted as co-partners under the state legislations. Okay. So now their claim was rejected. Now 2005 Act came. Now these married daughters, they appealed. So now once the central legislation comes, the state legislations will lose their weight. So here, this 2005 Act, when it came, the distinction between married and unmarried daughters is gone. So the married daughters, already they have rejected, their claim was rejected. So they preferred an appeal, claiming their right under 2005 Act. So this is what happened in that particular case. But there, they lost their case as their father was not alive as on 9/9/2005. So here, the second part of the Pulavati case, it was focused and the daughters could not win the case here, and because the father died prior to 9/9/2005. Now, you see, Pulavati and Dhanamma cases were referred in Mangammal case, but the court applied Pulavati's decision, opined that Prakash versus Pulavati would still hold the value of precedent for the right of a daughter in ancestral property, which it did not. In Supreme Court did not do it, did not highlight this importance of Pulavati in Dhanamma case. But in Mangammal case, it highlighted that Pulavati's decision is the best decision. And whenever a right of a daughter in the ancestral property would arise, then Pulavati case will be the binding precedent. Daughter of a co-partner means living daughter of a living co-partner. And court opined that Dhanamma's decision was not correct as the court failed to consider the date of death of the father. So here you see, now you must know clearly distinguish between these four cases. One is Ganduri Kotishwaramma. Decree means final decree. Even if there is a preliminary decree, the daughters can ask for reallotment of share. Then you come to Prakash versus Pulavati. Living daughter of a living father should be there. Then in Dhanamma, and even if the father is deceased prior to 9/9/2005, the court did not consider that point, and it focused mainly on the preliminary decree issue of the Ganduri Kotishwaramma and granted the daughter's claim. And now the Mangammal case, that is Pulavati's case is totally followed in Mangammal case. Okay. So in Pulavati case, Pulavati lost the case. In Mangammal case also, Mangammal lost the case. In Kotishwaramma, that is Ganduri Kotishwaramma, the daughters won. And in Dhanamma also the daughters won. So the decision, that is whether the decision was in favor of the male co-partners or female co-partners, what are the reasons why the court has held like that. You must have a clear idea about all these 4 cases. Okay. Then coming to this Vinita Sharma, that is our present. It is everywhere. It is said that it is a historical judgment, landmark judgment, and we will see, we will look into it. Vinita Sharma versus Rakesh Sharma. So you all know a bunch of 8 SLPs on similar issue, but from conflicting decisions of various high courts dating from 2015 to 2020. So many high courts, they were giving conflicting decisions with regard to daughters' right in the co-partnering. So 8 such SLPs were there, and one among them is Vinita Sharma ka case, and these SLPs were pending before the Supreme Court from 2015. So for 5 years, these cases have been pending, where a reference has been sought from a larger bench, because all these high court decisions, they were rendered by division bench, that is consisting of 2 judges. And so for reference, for a larger bench decision, they were before the Supreme Court. So now you all know the 3 judges, Justice Arun Mishra, Honorable Justice Abdul Nazir, and Justice M.R. Shah, and they decided the case, and the judgment was authored by Honorable Justice Arun Mishra. And here, if you just look into the case, the original case file, 40 advocates were on the record. So some advocates from the side of Union of India, some advocates representing all these 8 parties in the SLPs on both the sides. So 40 advocates were on record, and judgment was in the form of reference. Okay, it is only a reference. That is why the last part, that is para 128 of the judgment, it says, we answer the reference in the following manner. So the reference has been made to the larger bench in Vinita Sharma. Okay. So now the legal issue. So clubbed together, all the previous 4 cases, clubbed together, the main issues were, can a daughter be denied her share on the ground that she was born prior to 9/9/2005. So the date of birth, the year of the birth of the daughter. What is the year of the birth? Whether father should be alive as on 9/9/2005 for the daughter to claim benefit. Whether daughters can claim reopening of partition against the male co-partners, even if a preliminary decree was passed in a suit for partition filed by male co-partners. So now, the last one, it was decided by the Ganduri Koteshwaramma. It was applied in Prakash versus Kulavati. Okay. And now the similar issue has arisen in one of the SLPs from some high court. Okay. Now, I take you to the operative part of the judgment. So the judgment consists of 121 pages, consisting of 129 paragraphs, and in brief, para 129, there are some points. Section 6 confers status of co-partner on the daughter born before or after the amendment. So here, a daughter, whether she is born before 9/9/2005, even before 1956, or she is born after 9/9/2005. So here you see, they can be the co-partners. The scope of introducing the daughters into the co-partnery, it has been widened. So now the implication is, any daughter, married or unmarried, irrespective of their marital status, irrespective of her year of birth, a daughter in the family, the son's daughter, son's daughter, and the son's daughter, and they are co-partners. Okay. And then the second point, the rights can be claimed by the daughter with effect from 9/9/2005. You see, they have become co-partners by birth. So if a lady or if a woman, if a female is born in 1957, so now at the time of her birth, she was not a co-partner. Now, after 2005, as on 9/9/2005, she has been declared co-partner. Why? Because she is born in the joint family property when the act has come. But how will you, from which date she will enforce her right? She can enforce her right with effect from 9/9/2005. So here, I would like to take you to one important term that is new to you, retroactive effect. It is not retrospective effect, neither it is retrospective, neither it is nor it is prospective. Retroactive. What is this retroactive? I will be explaining to you. The rights can be claimed by the daughter with effect from 9/9/2005. Now, the third point. Since the right in the co-partnery is by birth, it is not necessary that father co-partner should be living. So here, which decision has been highlighted here? Even if she has been, that is, even if the father is not alive on 9/9/2005, the daughters. So here, still the platform is opened. It has been widened. The scope for the daughters to become co-partners has been widened. Okay, whether the father is alive or not, even if the father has died long back in 1980s or 1990s, and even in those families, the daughters of those families, and they can ask for a share. So here, a wider scope, that is, the legal net has been expanded. You can say the judicial net has been expanded to cover all the daughters. Next, the statutory fiction of partition created by proviso to section 6 did not bring about actual partition or disruption of co-partnery. It is only for the purpose of ascertaining the share of deceased co-partner, because this relates to way back to Gurupad case. Actually, in Gurupad case, when the Gurupad died, that is, when the father died and Gurupad, one of the sons, he filed a suit for partition, and mother also claimed a share. So you may be knowing, you just recollect the facts of those cases where the court said for the first time the notional partition, it was a landmark decision because notional partition was applied there, and it was a formula to work out the interest of the co-partner in the undivided property. So there, it was only a deeming partition, but all the other persons are also got their share. The court applied the deeming partition as an actual partition, and it is a different sort of discussion which is not required now at this point of time. So in order to highlight that, the court has taken the opportunity to say that the statutory fiction of notional partition, it is only a deeming partition and it does not amount to actual partition. That means only the deceased co-partner interest will be awarded and the remaining co-partner will be automatically intact. It will not result in the disruption of the entire co-partner. Okay, that has been clarified. Now, this is very, very important, but this point has been included in this fourth point. Notwithstanding that a preliminary decree has been passed, the daughters are to be given a share in the co-partnery equal to that of a son in pending proceedings. So in whichever joint family, the male co-partners have already filed a suit for partition, but they have not concluded the suit, they have not obtained the final decree in all those cases, and they have to reopen the case, they have to reopen this partition, they have to consider the share of the daughters also, and daughters should also be given a share. So this is one thing. Now, the fifth one, as per section 6(5), oral partition among male co-partners cannot be accepted. So it is very clearly, it is said, section 6(5), it is very clear. Partition means only the registered partition and court decree partition. Only these two partitions are saved. Okay, and the daughters cannot touch them in those cases. But now, the court in this case, it said, oral partition among male co-partners cannot be accepted. However, if it is supported by cogent public documents, it can be accepted. In such a case, the daughters cannot get benefit. So in all those families where oral partitions have been made, but it was not registered, and neither it was through a court decree, but some public document, excuse me, some public document is available with the male co-partners, like mutation of their names in the revenue records, etc. So those oral partitions are also saved under section 6(5). And in those oral partition cases, the daughters cannot get benefit. So here you see the remaining 4 points, the first 4 points, they have widened the scope of the daughter's right. And in the 5th point, it has widened the scope for the male co-partners to extend their plea. So to that extent, we can say that the first 4 points benefited the daughters, and the 5th point, and they benefit the male co-partners. So now the implication of this 6(5), that means I am very much concerned about this 6(5), where oral partition